Producing over 500 hours per week of talk radio, GCN Live is a world leader in talk radio. Archives for the following program can be found at gcnlive.com.
Live from the palatial studios at Emerson College in beautiful downtown Boston, this is the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Rebuilding America, together, investing, activism, and supporting the middle class. Now, here's Jeff.
Thank you, Shane, and good afternoon, Americans, and welcome to the Jeff Santos Show. We are live in Studio A on the campus of Emerson College. It is great to be with you today on this frigid Tuesday here in Boston, the 19th of January 2016. Big snowstorm expected here in Boston. Over a foot of snow, some are predicting. We'll see if that comes true. We haven't had really much this year at Intro 2 the other night, but we shall see. This is going to be the repeat of last year. Started around this time. Who knows? All right, we got a lot of great guests today, highlighted by Governor Martin O'Malley, will be with us at 4:30. From Iowa, and we'll get into the state of the race with the presidential candidate on the Democratic side at 4:30 Eastern. Katrina vanden Heuvel, publisher, editor of the Nation magazine, which has just endorsed Bernie Sanders, will join us at 5 p.m. Our regulars, Mark Taylor-Canfield, will start us off at 3:34. More police violence out of Seattle recently. We'll talk with Michael Flanagan, badass teacher out of New York City, out of the Bronx. Will talk to us on the latest education back and forth with Governor Cuomo and all the issues that teachers, public school teachers in New York, and for that matter across the country, have to deal with all the time. We'll wrap it up with Robert Craig, Wisconsin Citizen Action at 5:34 today. Want to get your thoughts at 844-3-SANTOS. We have obviously a lot of subjects to get to. The news on the right wing seems to be that there's going to be a announcement that Sarah Palin, I know my great web producer Sarah Billingsley, every time I mention that name she cringes. Anyways, we anticipate that tonight Sarah will fly in her Learjet, courtesy of Trump Air Force, and fly into Des Moines and announce that she will be backing Donald Trump. A little Dire Straits for you, 34 minutes past the hour. At this time every Tuesday, we go west, young men and young women, to the great state of Washington. We find and tune in to the great city of Seattle, where we usually find Mark Taylor-Canfield, but today he's at the airport just south of Seattle at the SeaTac area of Washington State, and he joins us on the line. How you doing, Mark? Happy Monday. Happy Tuesday.
Yeah, another rainy day in Seattle, but that's normal for us. I want to say, happy Teacher Tuesday to all the educators out there. We're definitely thinking about you up here in the state of Washington, where we have this education funding crisis going on, which we've talked about before.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, this is stuff that you're too progressive a state to have this real, inane kind of backwards policy when it comes to public education, and we need to change that for sure. I want to start talking about a national issue that I think will eventually make some headlines in Seattle, particularly when some reporter, and maybe it'll be you or I, that gets to Jim McDermott. That is the issue of single-payer health care. We've been going on a lot because it's obviously been an issue on the national level. And I feel that, Hillary Clinton is misrepresenting the fact that this would be a issue where it would destroy the Affordable Care Act and people on Medicare and all that and bundle everything up, all these misinformation techniques. And I guess there's two questions for you. One, what are you hearing from people? And, it is a scenario where I feel that we are going to basically screw up a opportunity to have single payer, like our friends in Canada do. This not far from you in Vancouver. Nobody's running down to sort of bunk bed with you in Seattle. And the second thing is that will McDermott say anything? Your thoughts?
Well, he and Bernie Sanders both introduced bills in 2011, Bernie in the Senate and Congressman McDermott in the House, on the single-payer issue. It's definitely been one of the major issues that Jim McDermott has taken a lead on. He himself, is part of the medical industry. He got his training in child psychiatry at the University of Washington Medical Center in Seattle, and he also served as a medical corps psychiatrist in California in the United States Navy. So he has a background on this issue that has been strong from the beginning, and so has Bernie Sanders. And I really think, yes, he would be a great guest on your show, and I'm sure he has a lot to say about the single-payer healthcare system, because he's been pushing it for a long time. He's been saying that the new healthcare laws with the so-called Obamacare has made progress towards covering a lot of people and finding a way to lower costs. But McDermott said that he thinks the best way to reduce the costs and guarantee coverage for everyone is a single-payer system like Medicare, at least expanding Medicare. So his bill that he introduced in 2011 was building on the new health care law by giving states the flexibility they need to go to single-payer systems on their own. And he just thinks straight up it would reduce costs and Americans would be healthier. And there are a lot of statistics that support that point of view. And Bernie Sanders has also been very strong on that. And I think that that's one of the issues that has really resonated with a lot of the youth vote, not only his stand on education. And by the way, there was a article in the New Republic recently that saying, hey, why not apply the same single-payer idea to education as well? And that's another issue that Bernie really resonates with the youth vote on. I think his staff is saying that, if they can get the youth vote out, that they can really add a lot of activism to the Democratic Party and get a Democrat-elected president in this election. So it's very important to the Bernie Sanders campaign that young folks come out. The issue that they've been having is that, so he's got to get some of these young folks registered, because there's a high percentage of people who, in that age group, who have not registered yet. But single-payer healthcare has always been an issue. McDermott's has always been something that is generally supported in his district. And, I have talked to him about other issues like net neutrality and some of these trade agreements. But this particular issue, I think everyone here has just felt like McDermott had the right plan, and that, it's still, I think his constituency still believes that single-payer healthcare is the way to go. If you talk to some folks from Canada, by the way, they've got some good things to say about that, despite some of this negative propaganda that's been spread lately.
Yeah, nobody is I've seen coming down from Montreal to Burlington or Seattle to Vancouver or Windsor to Detroit. No one is leaving. And this is, to me, just a bunch of propaganda, Mark, that we're getting from people, in the right-wing insurance company lobby, pharmaceutical company lobby, and that's all it is. And they may pick one or two right-wing Canadians saying, "Oh, we need to change it." Nobody's changing it. They haven't changed it under Republicans, and they haven't changed it under Democrats, even though obviously Harper might have wanted to do it, but he could never muster it because there's not enough people who want to destroy it. And do what? Come what America has? So, that would be the option. So, it's ridiculous.
Well, I would agree with you on that. I've never seen anyone in Seattle coming down from Vancouver to, get their prescription drug orders filled. It's just not the case, There's always been much more support for national health care in Canada, and it's always been a very controversial issue in the United States, mainly from the conservative side, because I think anybody in Jim McDermott's camp or Bernie Sanders' camp is full on that issue. There's no resistance that I can see amongst these campaigns. It's just a conservative issue, and a lot of red herrings are thrown up, a lot of anecdotal stories. It kind of reminds one of the welfare queen driving up to get her, food stamps in a limousine thing that we used to hear, from the conservative Reaganites. But it's just not true. National health care is something that we need in this country, and there's still a lot of people, Jeff, who are not getting adequate health care. And I know people who work 40 hours a week who still do not have adequate health care coverage.
That's right. And because it's unfortunately, the ACA has insurance companies as a big part of this, and until the insurance companies go out or are regulated to an extent where they really have no power, which would basically incorporate some kind of a single-payer system where you wouldn't need them. Otherwise, they're too powerful, and they can raise the premiums, which they're doing now. So a lot of people, do it. Now, they have to accept them. You have to have insurance if you have a pre-existing condition, which was the good thing in the past. But we are at a point right now where we can't afford to have a scenario where a Democrat and somebody who wanted single-payer health care as recently as 2008 or universal health care, which single-payer is a part of that to get to that point where everybody is covered, then that's a sad state of affairs because she's right now, until Bernie can win a couple of states, she's the leading candidate for the Democratic Party. So this is coming from within the Democratic Party. That's a real problem, Mark, when people in the so-called Progressive Party are actually dissing the idea of single-payer. That's why I want to hear from McDermott, who I think endorsed it correctly.
Yes, I've heard criticisms from my friends from other countries around the world who are really shocked that in such a developed nation like the United States that, you have people here in Seattle who can't afford to get their teeth fixed. I mean, come on, this is not, some backwards, nation. This is a fully developed and in the past, at least, industrialized nation, but we definitely have the technology and the healthcare experts here to treat people. But when you have folks flying to Costa Rica, in order to get their teeth fixed, there's a problem. And it's one of the sort of unmentioned negatives about American culture that people just don't seem to want to deal with on the conservative side. But it's a tragedy that people don't have the health care that they deserve and need, and also the costs in terms of insurance. I mean, it's just outrageous. The amount of money that's going into the healthcare industry, into the pharmaceutical companies is just incredible. And their lobbying power is incredible as well. Yes.
We'll come back with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield. It's the Jeff Santos Show. Take your calls at 844-3-SANTOS. We'll get into the issue of police reform in Seattle. They need it.
Connect on Twitter
at Jeff Santos Show.
Welcome back. 844-3-SANTOS, phone number to join us. We're talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the program. We've got lots to discuss when it comes to police reform nationally, but you're having some issues, Mark, the city of Seattle, that is, not you personally, of course, with police issues, police reform. What's the latest there in Seattle?
Well, actually, I did win a major federal civil rights lawsuit against the Washington State Patrol for violating my right to freedom of the press a couple of years ago at the state.
So
Capitol,
it does involve you then, all right.
Yes. But in this case, what we're talking about is some protests that took place on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in Seattle, and it goes all the way back to a Department of Justice investigation of the Seattle Police Department a few years ago, which found a practice and policy, and those are their words in the report, a practice and policy of the use of excessive force. There was also a review of allegations of racism within the police department. And so yesterday, on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, there was a press conference held early in the morning before any of the marches, headed up by people like Jesse Hagopian, who's a local school teacher who we've talked about was pepper sprayed by a police officer during last year's Martin Luther King Jr. Day march. Actually, as he was walking away from the march, the event was over at that point. But he held a press conference Mayor Murray actually made a statement at Garfield High School. Our mayor suggested that people walk up to police officers in Seattle and say, hey, I want to talk about racism. Let's work on this issue. Hagopian was saying that although, the Justice Department has been forcing these reforms for the Seattle police department, he's saying, I will tell you, these are his words, quote, I will tell you that my case is definitive proof that it's business as usual at the Seattle Police Department, brutalizing protesters who want to honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has a major connection with Seattle. He actually was here supporting the janitors' strike, shortly before his assassination. Folks in Seattle and the King County area, actually Eddie Rye was a local businessman who really pushed this idea of changing the name of Empire Way to Martin Luther King Jr. Way, which did happen. And then also we renamed King County, which was originally named after Rufus King, a former vice president of the United States. It's been renamed after Martin Luther King Jr. He has worked with activists here, in the past on these civil rights issues. So for this to come out on the day where the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee, which is staffed by activists, civil rights activists from the Native American community, the Hispanic community, the Asian community, the black community, the white community, it's telling about the state of civil rights in Seattle. One of the people that was involved, a woman that was involved in let's say, some people would say interrupting. This is the way that the Stranger magazine is describing it, although there is some, criticism of that description. But Marissa Johnson was one of the activists who interrupted Bernie Sanders' speech here in Seattle last year. Well, she herself said that the Seattle Police Department has not been reformed the way it should, and she actually called the Department of Justice reform process a sham. But yes, it is a major issue in Seattle, and it's still continuing. There was also a protest during the Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebrations against gentrification in the black community, and that's something that our mayor, Ed Murray, brought up during his State of the City address last February, which was economic and racial inequality in Seattle. And in that case, in the gentrification of some of these neighborhoods and the black flight that's taking place, both of those issues sort of meet. Economic injustice and racial injustice, because yes, minority communities have been greatly affected by the mass development that's going on in Seattle and this skyrocketing rents that are happening. Entire neighborhoods are just changing their demographics overnight. So that issue also was brought up. And although the marches and protests in Seattle this year were peaceful, which would have been in the tradition of Dr. King's take on this stuff, last year there were the major Highway 99 was blocked, and there were several arrests. So it's an ongoing issue, and every year in Seattle on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, thousands of people hit the streets, and all the community leaders come together. And this year, this kind of issue of racism in the Seattle Police Department was a major topic.
Well, I just sense that there is a real need here for the president to lead on this. He's leading on guns. You can connect the dots pretty easily, in my opinion. And this is something he's got this last year. He has to figure this out. And I'm hoping that he gets involved, because it's not only Seattle, of course, as you know, it's a number of other places. And he needs to, in my view, take a lead here. This cannot continue to happen.
I did want to mention that our new police chief, Kathleen O'Toole, a former police commissioner from Boston, was invited to President Obama's State of the Union address, and that presumably as an example of police departments who are in the process of reforming themselves. So although that is happening to a degree in Seattle, there are still a lot of civil rights activists who say that it's just not gone far enough, and that there's still an issue here. So, we'll see what happens, but the the reforms in Seattle are based on a history of bad relations between the community and the police department, and somehow that has to be resolved. I mean, it would be wonderful if the president, would visit Seattle and address this issue here amongst the black leadership, because I think that would really help push this issue forward. There needs to be national spokespersons on this issue, and really we need to keep the focus here in Seattle, because we do want to save this tradition of progressivism and being out there on the liberal edge, so to speak, on a lot of these issues. So hopefully a new police chief and the civil rights activists can get together and start to work together in a sense of unity rather than confrontation, which has been the tradition here in the past, at least as of late.
Well, I think that, we are at a point where these things continue to have to happen. Finally, before you go, Donald Trump has been well known for throwing reporters out and having a hard time with them, saying, if you kill them, well, I don't want to kill them, but whatever. He always uses those terms. There are some other issues on Reporters Without Borders. Give me 15 seconds on that, sir.
The Reporters Without Borders, an international advocacy group for journalists, rates the United States as 49th in the world in terms of press freedom, behind Namibia and Costa Rica. And there were some complaints about journalists arrested during the Chicago anti-racism protests. So, yes, it is an issue we need to address.
Definitely. Mark Taylor-Canfield, talk to you next Tuesday. All the best.
Thanks, Jeff. Have a great week.
You too. It hasn't been confirmed, but all the leaks are out there. So we'll stay tuned for that. But I want to talk a little bit about Trump in this regard, because we spent obviously a lot of time on Clinton and Sanders over the last 48 hours. But here is what I think is an important element. I saw the Brits yesterday trying to ban him from the country. Never. But the fact is that the way the systems work in Britain, you're not going to be able to do anything unless the Home Secretary does anything. But what I think is important here is that people have to realize that when they are electing leaders, that you need to hear specific policies and specific goals. What have you heard outside of a tax cut proposal of any policy from Donald Trump? If you are a Trump supporter, I'd love to hear from you. 844-3-SANTOS. There are a lot of people who are listening to us today in New Hampshire. He's doing very well in New Hampshire. And those in Nashua and Manchester who listen to us on AM 980. I know I'm not your favorite host since I am not a Donald Trump supporter, but I want to hear from you because I don't know what policies Mr. Trump will have. Where does he stand on the concern over health care? We've had this big debate on single-payer health care. He once liked it, but we haven't heard anything about it. Where does he stand on police reform? He talks about the cops being great and the other, and I have the blacks like me, not exactly racially sensitive. Where is he on the issue of 4 years of free university? He's always talking about, I went to Wharton, I got a great education. Well, what about everybody else? It's good for you, but everybody else can get screwed? Is that your idea of running the country? Where are you, Mr. Trump, on a number of other issues that relate to foreign policy? You had everybody go and see the movie 13 Hours. I checked it out myself. Okay. So what are you going to do? All these deals you make with Saudi Arabia, all these deals you make with Iran and Iraq and everywhere else, how is that going to affect your business? Are you just going to just sort of give it off to your kids and you're going to have most favored treaty status for your kids in your company? How's that whole conflict of interest going? So we have a lot of questions to answer. And the American media thus far has basically played a lot of softball. But at some point, they're going to wake up. They're going to wake up and they're going to say, we cannot let a dictator who hates the media just sort of waltz his way into the White House. Now, there are a lot of people in the Republican Party that still want to take him down. And maybe that will happen. I predict that it's not going to be anybody in the field. But can Mr. Ryan with a Kasich or a Haley or a Rubio as the number 2 ticket. That's viable, in my opinion. Republicans who have stolen elections in the past, 2000 and 2004 as an example, particularly in Ohio in 2004 and obviously Florida, and Gore won the more popular votes anyways. So they're subject to anything. Voting rights, they'll try to find a way to steal an election. So the idea of their own rules, which nobody governs but themselves. So Mr. Trump better watch out his back pocket. But here's the big but. Mr. Trump will make a deal with Reince Priebus, the head of the RNC, and others to sort of skirt around the entire process. Now, one of the things that's very interesting, we've seen these polls after polls over the last 20 years or so. More and more people are becoming independents, less Democrats, less Republicans. There are more Democrats than Republicans, but still. So what I'm beginning to see here, and we see this on both the Democrats and the Republican side, is that people are identifying less with a party, which means that a lot of young people who are very engaged and very supportive of Bernie Sanders, they are very much connected to Sanders' message. Sanders, of course, was an independent, now turned Democrat. He's always been connected to the Democratic Party, and I think he's actually very good for the party because he brings in young people, brings in energy, brings in new spirit, and brings in a way to get away from the corporatization, the Republican light mantra of the Democratic Party over the last 25, 30 years. Don't forget, Obama came in with the idea of change, but it really never happened. Not to the extent that we thought it could as progressives. And some will say, as Jim Warren has on this show, that he really wasn't that progressive to begin with. Okay, fine. But that was the hope and change, which did not change that much. In some ways it did. So when Secretary Clinton talks about, I want to protect the legacy of President Obama, all of a sudden, by the way, this is the same woman who criticized him all along the campaign trail in 2008. This is the same woman who wants to go to the no-fly zone in Iraq. This is the same woman who basically, is now hugging Obama on a lot of other issues, but has been critiquing him all along the way. Clinton operation is a smooth machine, but sometimes you're too slick for your own good. And you're seeing a heavily intensive campaign to go after progressives. She has been on a number of MSNBC shows over the last 72 hours. I believe Scarborough and Rachel Maddow, actually twice in the last week on Rachel. So they feel that they have to get to progressives. They need to change their message. Go after Bernie saying he's not the real thing. This is just a pipe dream. It's never going to get done. Destroy him now because they feel, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with the strategy here. We'll talk to our strategists tomorrow. Jerry, Earl, and Brad will be with us. That her attack mode here over the next 2 weeks is to try to figure out a way to hold on to Iowa and New Hampshire, at the very least Iowa. She can always say, New Hampshire was the next door neighbor, which is really kind of not really true because the major media markets are Boston, which is not a lot different, 3.5 hours from Burlington, which is really where Bernie lives and where a lot of the population is north, Montpelier as well. So there is a significant Hanover population, Dartmouth College in the western part, but it's different than Manchester and Nashua, Concord, which is the 3 biggest cities. By the way, no rail to Boston. So that's what we're seeing. So watch now, and she'll do some stuff on CNN, but less so because CNN it skews older and it skews more moderate to right wing. They've been trying to compete with Fox, even though that's a waste of time. So we're going to see here this attempt. And I feel that people should not be bamboozled. by the approach of Secretary Clinton, who has attacked single-payer health care, which is something she was for at one point in her career and her political life. If you haven't already, and I believe Bryan Cranston is up for the Best Actor, go see Trumbo. John Wayne is characterized as a right-wing bigot in that movie. So that's Donald Trump hero. People should think about that. It's the Jeff Santos Show. Back in a flash. Minutes past the hour. 844-3-SANTOS, phone number to join us. Again, coming up later, we'll be talking to Katrina vanden Heuvel at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Recently endorsed, Nation Magazine did, Bernie Sanders. And then Martin O'Malley, candidate for president on the Democratic side, joins us at 4:30. And we look forward to talking to the governor. This is third time on the show. 844-3-SANTOS, the phone number to join us. Here's another point on this thing about Trump. We cannot allow, and this is the problem that I've had with the Democratic Party, pretty much going back to the 1990s. We don't control the message. Right-wing talk radio controls the message. Now Donald Trump controls the message. And he goes on every television show. He goes on television with his pajamas. Doesn't even actually go to the studio. In the morning, anyways. So this is why it is so important to have this political revolution, if you might, that Bernie Sanders is talking about. Maybe that's a tough word in some parts of the country, but you don't want to use the word change. So maybe you want to call it a peaceful revolution? I don't know, but somehow, some way, there needs to be a avenue here to deliver a progressive message through the Democratic Party. And if the Democratic Party doesn't want to become a progressive party, then at some point, you may have to find a different party if you're a progressive. And it doesn't mean you have to be every single issue that progressives want have to be dealt with, but you got to have at least a handful of them, and particularly on the economic side, because otherwise there's really very little difference. I mean, some people who look at the Democratic Party today and say, okay, their difference on choice, gay rights, women's rights, civil rights, okay, from the Republican, understood. But on where the power is, where the money is, there are a lot of Democrats that play that game, and they want people to vote for them because of the fact that they are, and correctly so, thankfully, not racist, not homophobic, not sexist. But if you want to gain a lot of people who are white and who have suffered through these economic downturns, then you better start talking about the economic message. Because as we found out yesterday in Maine, where they got that nutcase of a governor who's a racist as well, that once you get out of the center cities and suburbs that are adjacent to the city, you're not getting the connection to a lot of people who are turned on to the Limbaugh because he's everywhere. There's not enough. It was 6-1 conservative to progressive talk radio when we had Air America. Never mind now. So we're at a point in our history where if we don't start having a progressive message on economics, then we're going to be in a very, very difficult situation, because what you end up with is people just sort of trampling over each other to get ahead. That's not a civilized society. And when you look at Europe, you see the foundations of healthcare and education for everybody. That is something we need in this country, and it's long overdue. We're right back. It's the Jeff Santos Show.